Welcome to Compelling Conversations, where law meets business. With your host, Dara Rosenbaum, founding partner and attorney at Rosenbaum & Taylor in New York. You can watch episodes on YouTube and listen through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. For prior episodes and free resources, go to www.rosenbaumtaylor.com/learn. Now here's the host of Compelling Conversations, Dara Rosenbaum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to what I expect is going to be a compelling conversation with Patrick Conlon. Patrick Conlon, PE, is the founder and managing principal of Conlon Engineering, LLC in Brookfield, Connecticut. Pat is a licensed professional engineer with 20 years of high-profile structural engineering experience. Mr. Conlon is a registered professional engineer in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and South Carolina. He has a BS and MS degree in civil engineering from Manhattan College and is a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers, the Structural Engineers Coalition in Connecticut, the International Code Council, and the American Institute of Steel Construction. And he's going to have to explain all of that to me. Pat has lent his experience and creativity to large, challenging, new, high-profile projects, including the iconic Yankee Stadium, the 75-story tall 157 in Manhattan, and the new 22,000 square foot steel-framed column-free Blessed Kateri Church in LaGrangeville, New York, as well as numerous other projects of varying scales. The owners, architects, contractors, and property managers with whom he collaborates seek Pat out as a project partner, because of his work ethic and focused client service. As founder and managing principal of Conlon Engineering, LLC, Mr. Conlon has created a culture that is highly client-focused and disciplined. He takes great pride in the firm's ability to address structural challenges for diverse clients in the areas of new construction, renovation, and structural rehabilitation of existing structures in a variety of categories, including commercial, residential, industrial, office, school, religious, historic and recreational buildings, adaptive reuse projects, LEED accredited projects, peer reviews of other engineers' work, and feasibility studies. So welcome, Pat. This is going to be a fascinating conversation because I'm not even sure about most of what I just read.
Well, you did a fine job, Dara. That was impeccably stated. I feel flattered with the way you introduced me. Thank you for that.
Well, all right. So let's start off with, what does a structural engineer do? Because you are our first structural engineer on the program.
Okay. It took a long time for me to figure out how to explain to people what I do, because it's a highly technical practice. So, but I guess the simplest way I can state it is, if you imagine your body and you look at yourself and you say, well, I have eyes and a face and so on and so forth. And, we all see the skin and the body. Okay. Mm-hmm. But, without our bones, okay, we would just be a puddle on the ground. Right. So you can imagine that
I'm picturing Wicked Witch of the East.
Right. Exactly. We'd all melt. Right.
Yeah. Or West. I'm not sure.
The structural engineer designs the skeleton that holds the body up. So we don't make the finished product. Our best work, you never see it. It's hidden in the floor, it's hidden in the walls and the like. But without our contribution to a construction project, you'd have a lot of blobs sitting on the ground.
Got it. Okay, so we don't see it necessarily, but we would certainly miss it if it wasn't there.
Bingo. That's it. Yes.
That's perfect. Sounds good. Now let's just talk a little bit about your career path, because I know you're an owner and founder of Conlon Engineering now. Mm-hmm. Did you start out, right out of school, starting your own firm, or what?
No. So I started this business about 12 years ago now. I had done stints with a few different employers in different locations to start my career. Really, as a practical matter, when you get a degree in engineering, you're not really, you're not licensed to practice engineering yet. It's similar to other professions where you have to go through this, not an apprenticeship, but kind of a training period. In engineering, you're called an engineer in training. So you can't even practice on your own until you obtain your PE license, which takes 4 or 5 years of experience, depending on how the cycles of testing goes. Mm-hmm. But really, to become proficient and expert in it, to the point where you don't need somebody holding your hand and leading you through complex decisions, you really need about 10 years of experience.
Okay.
So I was at about that point in my career, about 12 years ago, and that time coincided with the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
We all remember those times well. 2008, 9, and 10 in our industry
Yeah.
were brutal years. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I was an employee at a larger firm at the time, and they were really hit hard by the recession. They were a big part of their book of business was in custom residential design. And of course, you remember what happened with the housing crisis. So their business went from, basically 50% of it evaporated overnight. And so at the time I was, I had just gotten married. We were having kids, and I was at a time in my life where I could not absorb, a big career shock. So I had to make a decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to stick around here, or am I going to go out and start my own firm? So I decided to take a chance to start my own firm. I had kind of been mentally preparing to do it for a long time. I always thought that I could do more as an owner than I was doing as a staff member of a larger firm. And some opportunities presented themselves to me, and I was prepared to take those opportunities. Some people call that luck. I call it, good preparation. And so I jumped, and I haven't looked back since.
Now, I mean, a lot of people, I think, in that situation, finding that their industry was hit hard, that their larger employer was hit hard, would not necessarily find the confidence or even the desire to start their own company. So what kind of mental preparation was it that you were doing, or where did you find that confidence to just start your own firm at a time when a larger firm that was more established was already struggling?
It was just there. I just felt good. I felt like, I felt like I was mentally prepared. I felt like I had the confidence with what I do for a profession, and I had developed relationships with clients. People liked me. They trusted me. Yep. And I just felt like this is going to work. It also helped, to be honest with you, Dara. I knew a number of other colleagues. Who had started their own firm in years prior, and they were all successful. So knowing that I wasn't the pioneer, so to speak, that other people had done it, been successful, I said, well, if he can do it, if they can do it, why not me?
Now, let me ask you, because one of the things that I preach is that, we're very few of us are doing something that nobody has ever done before in any way, shape, or form. So, I always preach that people should, find the people who are doing something similar and learn from them, learn from their mistakes, learn from what they would do differently, learn from their successes. Did you lean on any of those people who you'd seen do it before, or did you kind of try to, plod your own path?
It's a good question. So, I worked for a number of different firms, saw a number of different management styles. And one thing about engineering practitioners is we're not, as a profession, we're not known as being particularly good managers.
I think that's true of a lot of professions. I think a lot of people want to practice the profession or work in the field as opposed to managing something.
As opposed to manage it, right? So, I saw a lot of bad managers, and I had a lot of crummy bosses. Over the years, and with all due respect to them, I mean, every one of those people that I work for, I owe them a debt of gratitude, because I learned a lot during those periods. I learned what to do, and I also learned what not to do. And a lot of the practices that I have embraced as the owner of my business have been to avoid some of the poor practices that I've seen other engineering managers practice. And a lot of the things that we do here are meant to counteract, things that I felt were done poorly early on in my career.
Yeah. And I think that's a lesson that anybody who's starting any business or thinking about starting a business can take. It doesn't have to be an engineer. Anybody who's seen, it sounds to me like you took a lot of time to think through and absorb what people were doing right, what people were maybe that could be done better, and what you would want your company to look like if you got to that point.
Absolutely. It was always on my mind, as far as, one big thing that I thought lacked at some engineering firms was, training and encouraging, like having like a defined, like mentoring process, was not strong at some firms, which is unfortunate because you go through school and you get an engineering degree and you learn a lot. It's a highly technical, specialized thing. But then the practice of it is very, very different. All you've really learned, it's like, I went to kindergarten, I learned my ABCs and my 1, 2, 3s. I've got these basic building blocks, but I can't write a novel or a short story yet, right? You learn to write the novel, actually when you're practicing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have those building blocks, but you don't know how to put them into place in the real world.
A great analogy.
Yeah. So you need mentors to show you how to do that. And that can be a little weak in some places when you've got, not a good management, focus, when they're focused on, well, this is how you do it, So that's something that I've spent a great deal of time. And honestly, it's been one of my favorite parts, especially early on, was mentoring young engineers and showing them, well, this is how this works. And just as importantly, when you're an engineer, you have an instinct. You want to know why things work. Right. Mm-hmm. I remember as a kid, it's like, well, why does this radio work? Well, let me take it apart.
I was just going to ask you if you took apart electronics as a kid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had this great big record player. I remember taking it apart. So you want to know why things work. So when you mentor an engineer, you can't just say, well, this is how it is. And you can't be dogmatic about it. You have to explain, well, the reason that it is this way is because of this and this and this, and we're trying to accomplish this and so on. And I get a great deal of satisfaction in doing that. Mm-hmm. I like it a lot.
Did you have a particular mentor that you think back to or still work with?
Particular mentor.
No,
there are people that I've worked with that are in my heart and mind. Some people that had a good influence on me. I'm thinking of one particular employer in the city. I had a short stint with them, but he was great. He really set a great atmosphere for his office, and it was one where people just could be happy doing what they were doing while still working hard. And he really set a good tone. And I've thought of him in how I set the tone and culture of this office a lot.
And I think that's a great lesson for anybody in any business, any entrepreneur, any entrepreneur working with, just except for their solos, if they're working with people or if they've got a small business. I think that's a great lesson just for anybody in that category. What did you take from him? What kind of lessons did you take from him in terms of the culture and setting the tone for the office?
He was just a nice guy, that's all. It was nothing profound. I mean, his name was Steve, and he was just a nice guy. He wasn't a pushover by any means, but he was just nice to people. He'd see you in the elevator and he'd talk to you.
Yeah.
And he'd ask what's going on in your life. And he was interested in you. Mm-hmm. And he smiled. He smiled a lot. And I remember that office, and he was tremendously successful. He bootstrapped this company. And when I was there, I think he had 35 or 40 employees from just himself. And people loved working for him.
Yeah.
And I watched him, and I said, all he does is he's just friendly.
Yeah.
That's it. Right.
That could be the secret sauce, right?
Yeah. It's amazing. It's like, the best things are simple, right? So you don't whip your employees. You don't treat them like they're slaves or indentured servants or something. Mm-hmm. And you're just nice to people, and they'll pay it back.
Yeah. So when you started Conlon Engineering, was it just you? Did you start with a staff of a certain size? How'd you start it?
It was just me. So It was just me. I sublet an office from some commercial real estate brokers who are actually right around the corner from me here. And I look back on that time fondly. It was a windowless room in the back of their office. And I had used furniture, and I think I even had a used printer. It was great. It really was, And
I did the same thing. And we started by ourselves, and we went into executive suites. We didn't have. I guess we had used furniture, but it wasn't our. It was not our furniture. It was basically rented as part of the room.
Yeah.
That's how we started, because we wanted to keep overhead low, and we also wanted to kind of ease our way into running a company. And we had basically plug and play with internet, and they already had a copier on site. We didn't have to worry about a kitchen, all those kind of things that are important when you want to have a cup of coffee in the middle of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that was key, was getting that sublet office.
Yeah.
And I also enjoyed their company too. A commercial real estate broker versus an engineer, their day is wildly different. Okay. So they're on the phone, they're like jostling and so on. And it's a much more active environment.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like an engineering environment, you're hunched over and you're on the computer, and it's very.
By the way, all I see when you did that was like an aching neck and bad posture.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's very easy to develop body problems in the practice of engineering. Really, really is.
Yeah.
But those guys, they created a lot of life, right? There was atmosphere in the office, which I really appreciated, because I was working alone. That was one of the tough things, like when you're in a company with staff, you can bounce ideas off people. You can ask, hey, how do you do this or whatever? And I missed that in the beginning. At least with them around, I had some banter and water cooler talk or what have you.
Yeah. That's one thing I talk about too, is if you're not going to be in an office with somebody, or you're going to be working from home, or what are you going to be doing, find people, find a community where you can, you've got people you can talk to, and you can at least whether it's business, professional, whatever it is, who can support what you're doing. Because in the beginning, especially when you're on your own, it's difficult to get that perspective and figure out where you get resources for things.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? Who do you bounce things off of? Who do you get information from? Who do you get resources from? Who do you find out who to trust? So I think whether they're in the office or they're outside the office, you got to go find them.
Yep.
So you've talked about, obviously starting by yourself. What happened next? How'd you grow? Because I know it's not just you now.
Yeah. So now we have, let's see, there's 7 of us, 7 engineers today, including me, and we've got one admin person. And so we've been slowly growing, or more or less organically for the entire time. Mm-hmm. How did we grow? So, my strategy all along has been to be, likable, trustworthy, and competent, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think you are all those things.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. The clients have just come back, and we've been referred a number of times, and look, it's really no great mystery. When the work exceeds what I can output myself, it's time to find some help. Mm-hmm. I have to give a lot of credit to, my first full-time hire, who was Chris O'Brien, who came on after a few years, and Chris brought some experience. Didn't hurt that he brought some clients too, but most importantly, he brought the experience and a great attitude. And he was a key person to bring on here, because I had enough work, that I needed help. It was more than I could do, but it wasn't quite enough to fill up another person, right?
Right.
So Chris was able to, take the excess that I had and then lever it, and now he was busy too. So we went from this to this, with one person, and then things kind of just. There? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Is he still there?
Yeah. Oh, is he still there? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, he is. Yeah, he's.
Oh, you thought I was saying, are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. And things kind of took off from there. We had another person in the wings, a guy that he interned with me my first couple of years, and the way I found Max is great. So my wife is a former teacher, so she's home with the kids now. But before kids, she was a teacher, and like a lot of teachers, she tutored, and she tutored this one high school student, Max Johnson, and he ultimately went to engineering school after she was done tutoring him.
Okay.
And he knew that Jen's husband, me, was an engineer, so he wrote her a note when he was a sophomore or a junior and said, "Hey, can Pat find me a job?" And this was when I was, working solo. So he interned for me when my first year. So again, he kind of filled that gap, between the work that was coming in and what I could do, and also gave me an opportunity to mentor. And he was the number 2 hire.
Wow.
Was Max, and Max is still here, and he's been great. He really has. While working here, he got the experience to qualify for the PE license exam. He took the exam and passed it. He's gone through all the levels of our titles, from starting entry-level engineer. Now he's a project manager, and he's killing it.
That's great. That's great. A good, fortuitous tutoring session.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think back to that sometimes. I'm like, wow, did that really happen?
And your wife probably still thinks of him, back to when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Project manager.
Yeah.
What's the vision for the size of the company?
So that's a good question. The strategy here is we want to provide a company that is a long-term landing place for our staff, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So in order to people have a long-term career, they need to move up the spectrum, right? So they need to start, where you're at one point you're a soldier in the trenches, all right? And then you want to move up and to ultimately be a lieutenant and a general and so on.
Right.
So if you want to get to that level, well, some more soldiers need to be in the trenches for you.
Right.
So we want to continue to grow the company so that the staff, as they move through, they have a future, and they don't get to the point where I was 12 years ago, where I don't see a future.
Right.
Okay. I love my staff. I really do. Like, we've got great people here. I love working with them. I love talking to them. We go out to lunch once a month as a company. We call it an end of the month lunch, and it's just like a low stress social lunch. That's all. And I really enjoy their company.
Yeah.
I care about them and their families, and I want them to have a long-term place here. I don't want to rotate people in and out. So therefore, really, what's my long-term strategy is to grow the company as large as it needs to be to provide a place where my staff can spend their career.
And I love the lessons that you've taken from your own career in terms of building your own company, because obviously 12 years ago you were frustrated and felt like there wasn't a future for you where you were. And you're very sensitive to that, even as an owner now, that, even 12 years later, you recognize what that person who's a new hire feels like. And that if they want a long-term career at your company, you have to, you want to be able to provide that for them. So I think it's a really, really nice sentiment. And I think sort of a testament to what you've learned from the way, the way that you've gone through your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you asked a few minutes ago, a lot of things I do here are to counteract things that I experienced and said, hey, it doesn't need to be this way. Right. So if I'm going to be in charge of this office, well, I'm not going to do and make the same mistakes that frustrated me earlier in my career. This is my chance.
And what are the things that you do differently? Because I think that those will certainly apply to viewers and listeners who are in different fields and who are, running different kinds of companies in different fields and industries. So what are those kind of lessons that you've taken that you now do differently based on what you saw earlier in your career?
So I really care about my people. I really do. And it sounds cliche and, maybe.
Honestly, though, it also sounds sincere. So, cliches are cliches for a reason sometimes.
Yeah. So, that's for one thing. I really care about them. You think about it, I spend more time with my staff here than I do with my wife and kids every week. It's an undeniable fact. I'm here for 40 or so hours a week. I don't spend 40 or so hours a week at home except when I'm sleeping.
Right.
So I think about that. I want to enjoy their company, and let me just roll it back. I want them to be happy because I want to be surrounded by happy people.
Right.
Right. Okay. It's so simple. So, so that's one of the things that I try to focus on. Also, mentoring people and giving them the foundation they need to do what they need to do. Okay. And this connects with explaining why things are instead of just saying, well, here it is. Okay.
Right.
Being dogmatic. So mentoring and taking time just to teach people things when I have an opportunity. If I'm reviewing a project with somebody, even if it's a rote project, I'll look for an opportunity to sprinkle something in. Like, hey, by the way, did you notice this? This is why that is there. And give somebody a little nugget here and there that they won't have to struggle to find on their own. I'm just going to give it to them.
And I'm sure they appreciate that.
I hope so.
Yeah. It sounds like, listen, if I were an engineer, it sounds like a great place to work.
Thank you. I hope it is. We've got a pretty good track record with keeping people here. So I think we're doing at least a few things right.
Yeah. And you talked about kind of the genesis of your business coming out of the recession of 08, 09, 2010. What do you do to kind of guard against the inherent risks in the economy, changes in the industry that could affect your business?
So this is on everybody's mind right now. Our business is definitely not recession resistant.
Right.
I've been through now in my career, I guess maybe three major downturns, I guess, and it's painful. It really is. And one of the things that I noticed put previous employers in a bad position was being focused in certain sectors of the industry.
Okay.
And when that sector took a dive, they weren't in position to deal with it. So I've always had an emphasis on being diversified with our offerings.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of different things here. Sometimes it's hard to believe like how radically different the projects are that we work on. And there's a method to the madness. And that is so that we're not riding this big wave, okay, that is like, say if one company I worked for was focused on telecom work, right? You remember in like the late 90s, early 2000s, that's when like there were so many companies, so it's now all Verizon, AT&T, and maybe T-Mobile. But
I'll tell you, funny thing, I actually almost took a job with MCI WorldCom.
Right.
Which, I mean, clearly would have had a very long career starting there in 2000.
Right. So there were like 10 of those companies at that time. And so they were all building their network. So there was a huge volume of work. Oh my God, everywhere. Like it was just coming in droves.
Right.
But then eventually the networks were done being built. And then there was a recession that kind of coincided with that. And all that work evaporated. And oh no, all of a sudden now we're laying people off and we're in big trouble.
Right.
I'll never forget my boss walking by my desk, and he was walking by a project manager sat next to me, and he saw what looked like a purchase order on the PM's desk, and he was like, "Oh, is that a PO?" As if to say, like, "Oh, I haven't seen a new purchase order in months." Like, oh my God!
And and listen, as an owner, that's a scary feeling.
Oh yeah. Now,
or an exciting feeling if you think it's new, but it's a scary feeling that they're not coming in.
When they're not coming in, and now you see one, and I'll never forget that because I could tell he was feeling stressed about not getting new work coming in the door. So the takeaway to that and some other similar experiences, again, was having a diversified practice. So, in our company here, we do structural repair work. So a lot of our work is in New York City, even though we're based in Fairfield County. But we have staff going to New York City, looking at old buildings that have corroded steel framing. That have it's actually mostly steel framing corrosion that we deal with. And there are some issues with floor slabs. Okay, and that work is basically like a regular cycle, right? It's pretty much just plods along because New York City will always be there. And it has a huge inventory of old buildings that constantly need maintenance work. So that's like a staple of our work. We do some specialty engineering design. You mentioned in my intro the project. They called it 157, ONE 57. Right. That was a building on West 57th Street. They called it the Billionaires Playground, and they were selling apartments for outrageous sums of money. And people were coming from all over the globe buying condos in this apartment building. And this actually spurred a little cottage industry of super, super high-end luxury condos in that West 57th Street area of New York City.
Sure.
West 57th Street is one block south of Central Park South. So if you build high enough on 57th Street, you have great views of the park. Right? So about half a dozen of these buildings were built in that area over about a 10-year period. So we did a ton of work on a couple of those buildings. So now that's like another niche, right? Now that work has kind of taken a dive down. There hasn't been another one of those projects recently. We also do custom single-family residences, which is on its own cycle. Okay. And that one actually took off during COVID, believe it or not. Well, because real estate did in general. So that's another cycle. We've also done some healthcare stuff. So I'm not sure how I got on the track, but the point is, we have a diversified mixture of clients and types of projects. And the purpose of that is to avoid big downturns in the business cycle. And now
that's a great takeaway for anybody in any industry, really, is that, you don't want to invest too heavily or rely too heavily on one client or one particular type of work if you can avoid that.
Yeah, it's too risky. It's too risky. And I'm a risk averse guy when it comes to making the rent payment and making the mortgage payment.
You're an engineer. We don't want the bones of our buildings to be like, hey, he took a risk here.
Yeah. I don't like to roll the dice, maybe sometimes for fun, but not with the important stuff. Right.
Right.
So, I want to keep my staff here. I don't want to have layoffs when times get tough for portions of the industry.
Right.
To build an engineering company, to hire people is one of the hardest things that I do. to find qualified candidates, and then to see that they'll fit into our culture, right?
Yeah.
That they're going to work well in this paradigm that I have created. Not everybody will, right? So when you find somebody and then you offer them the job and then they accept it, I want to do everything I can to keep them forever.
Right, because you're making that commitment to them.
Right, and part of that commitment is making sure we don't go really far down when the economy suffers. Hence the diversified strategy.
Yeah, good, really good. Sounds like a good strategy. So listen, there's been lots of lessons that you've learned along the way, and I really appreciate you sharing them. What I'd like to ask everybody is, what is one thing that you've learned along your journey that you just wish you'd known earlier?
Oh boy, the one thing. It's managing people is a challenge, to be sure. As much as I love my people, it is a challenge, because people have their own personal lives, right? And circumstances in their personal life changes, and then that affects the business in one way, shape or form,
right?
Which I guess it's kind of like a black swan, right? Like what's the big surprise about that? But it's not something I really thought a great deal about. You get focused on our little silo here, but we're really not isolated from the world.
Right.
Everybody has their personal life. They're married. They have kids. They have grandparents, or whatever. So trying to manage all of that and its effect on our business can is just a different skill set that I was not prepared for, and I'm still kind of figuring it out as I go.
Not part of the engineering curriculum.
No, they're not. I didn't see that on even the electives. What's a school? Damn.
They didn't teach you in law school either. It's okay.
Okay, good. But again, if you go to your core values, and to care about people, okay, and we want to be the employer of choice. Like, I want somebody to want to work here. I don't want to antagonize them and pretend like their personal life doesn't matter. So, be accommodating. And if we hire the right people that have our values, they will respect and appreciate it, and they'll return the loyalty.
Which is, I think, a beautiful lesson. And it says a lot really about your company that you even think through those things, because I think a lot of people don't. Yeah. Well, Pat, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed learning about your career path and how you built your company, and a little bit more about what structural engineers do, because I know, I've got a 3-year-old. I think engineer, I think train. So
yeah, most people do.
The wide world of everything from, civil, mechanical, structural. So thank you for sharing that. And how can people find you? How can people get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Okay, so people can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Patrick Conlon. I love making connections on LinkedIn. They can also call me at 203-740-0990. I would love to talk to anybody. And then, of course, you can reach me by email at pat@conlonengineering.com. CON as in Nancy, LON as in Nancy, engineering.com.
Perfect. And we will include all of that when we post the video. So thanks, Pat, for a great conversation. Really enjoyed this. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Dara. I really appreciate the invite. I really do. I enjoyed it.